welcome to stage one of the resolution game, which is the self-exploration exercise. The purpose of the self-exploration exercise is for you to become more knowledgeable and self-aware of how the devious dozen archetypes relate specifically to your life. It really is this simple. Self-exploration and self-awareness equals power. The more aware you are of self, the more conscious power that you have. And conscious power is the circuit breaker of your unconscious habits. So let's get into this. Now that you have familiarized yourself with the profiles of the 12 different archetypes, it would be fair to say that some of them resonated with you deeply and others not so much. Perhaps even there was one or two of the archetypes that had no resemblance whatsoever, and that's fine. We are all unique individuals with different characteristics. Within your psychology, you will also have two or more prime archetypes. Prime archetypes are defined as the most prominent, intense, and frequent traits of your character. These prime archetypes are the most dominant and controlling over you. So, what now follows is a 4-step procedure of self-exploration, where you will explore these different archetypes within yourself. And to be clear, this exercise is to only explore your psychology to become more knowledgeable and aware of self. You are not trying to solve anything with this particular exercise. You are simply gaining a thorough inner standing of the behavioural patterns of each archetype as they relate to your life. And also, please note that there is no right or wrong way to do this exercise, only your way to do it. So implement the instructions of this exercise in a way that makes sense for you. Search your mind and trust your feelings and allow each revelation to naturally unfold into your awareness. Also, please do not rush this exercise. Take however long it takes to explore these different parts of your psyche. When you approach this self-exploration exercise, do it from the third person perspective. From the third person perspective, you are the observer and questioner of your mind that is separate to the mind, which means that you have depersonalized and dissociated from the inquiry process. The purpose of this third person perspective is twofold. Number one, you are disassociated from your thoughts and therefore less likely to be triggered with a harmful emotional reaction. Number two, engaging with the mind from the third person perspective, you will begin to develop a higher self mentality that is separate and superordinate to the lower self part that you are analysing. And one final thing before you do start, and this is more of a warning. If during this exercise you do start to experience distressing thoughts and emotions and start recalling a traumatizing memory that you are unable to cope with, then please do stop this exercise immediately. You do not want to relive a past trauma and cause more psychological harm. So if you do get to a point where you begin to feel yourself getting uncomfortable, just take a pause and a breather. Then return back to the exercise when you feel better. Start again, perhaps with a different question that does not trigger you. If, however, this exercise continues to elicit a traumatic memory, or indeed that you feel stressed or anxious by it, then reach out to the Mind Games team for professional guidance and support. Right, let's begin with this self-exploration exercise. I will walk you through the process so that you know with certainty how to proceed with each question. Let's start with step one. Step one of the self-exploration exercise is where I want you to identify with the archetypes that are present within your psychology. So take a moment to locate a quiet working space that is free from distractions. Then open up a fresh page in your therapeutic journal and write down today's date with the main headline, The Resolution Game. Now write the first subtitle, which is Establish My Archetypes. Your first task of this exercise is to establish the exact archetypes that you think you have. Now, reviewing the profiles of the Devious Dozen, you are to identify with the archetypes that resonate with you the most. It could be 3 of them, 6 of them, or the whole dozen. It matters not the number of archetypes that you identify with. It matters which archetypes that you feel are having the most impact on your life. So right now, pause this video to establish which archetypes of the Devious Dozen resonate within your life. Then compile a written list of their names. Now I want you to rate each of the archetypes from the most to the least prominent in terms of their influence over you. So for example, if you have identified 8 archetypes, then rate the list from 1 being the most to 8 being the least prominent. This rating exercise will automatically ascertain what the prime, the first and second archetypes are for you. Now moving on to step number 2, where you will identify the detrimental impacts. Within this second step, you are now to identify with all of the different type of detrimental impacts that a particular archetype is having in your life. This requires you to take an honest appraisal of where you think this archetype is the result of self-abusive and self-sabotaging behaviors that harm, limit, and prevent you from being the best version of you. You are to identify where an archetype is bringing out the worst in you in the different areas of your life. And it will help you to review the archetype profile and contemplate where it does impact your life. And given that the prime archetypes that you have rated as number 1 and 2 are impacting you the most, then it makes sense to start with these. So begin with the number 1 archetype from your list that you identified back in step 1. Now I want you to write in your journal the next subtitle, which will be Identify the Detriments of the archetype that you're going to begin with. Now you are to contemplate the different type of detrimental impacts that you think this archetype is having on your life, where you believe that this archetype is resulting in self-abusive and self-sabotaging behaviors. And I want you to describe each one of those detrimental impacts into a short and concise statement. Once you have identified all the different detrimental impacts, I now want you to rate them from 1 being most detrimental to the greatest number, the least detrimental. And for the purpose of this exercise, I will now use the fantasist archetype as the example going forward. So if I was going to identify with the different types of detrimental impacts that the fantasist is having on my life. I would go back and refresh myself on the fantasist profile, and then I would be thinking in terms of, do I have any pleasure-based fantasies that are having a negative impact on my life? Do I have any ideals, fantasies that are leading to negative consequences? Or do I have any sexual fantasies that are dark or inappropriate? What I'm trying to establish in this step is where this particular archetype is resulting in self-abusive and self-sabotaging behaviours. Where is this archetype harming, limiting and preventing me from being the best version of myself? Where is this archetype causing me to be the worst version of myself? And I know that I'm repeating myself here, but I'm doing that just to drive home exactly what it is that I'm asking you to do, to ensure that you are clear on how to tackle this step. So again, just begin with one archetype and take the time out, pause this video to contemplate where this archetype is having a detrimental impact on your life and describe in detail how this happens. Once done, I want you to move on to step 3. In this third step, you will tackle the self-exploration questions. Before you do start to deeply explore the archetypes, there's something important you need to know. Through years of self-denial and self-deception to avoid dealing with the truths about oneself and reality, we've all developed these psycho-barriers. Psycho-barriers are the evasive, defensive and offensive styles of thinking that we have learned in order to avoid dealing with the truths of reality. They are the mental barriers that we put up and the misdirections that we give out to not expose our most vulnerable, secretive and sensitive parts of self. These psycho-barriers will be up during the questioning process as you seek to explore the innermost regions of self. When you answer the questions, you are likely to be reflexive with a smoke screen response, a surface answer that obfuscates the truth underneath. With self-exploration, nothing but the absolute truth about the self is acceptable. The truth will set the secrets of you free. The secrets being the fears, the insecurities, the traumas and the shames. Therefore, to probe beyond those psycho barriers and get deeper into the unconscious realms of self, you can use what is called the what else questioning technique. Here's how it works. With each self-exploration question, when you ask what else to the same question, each time you will elicit a different answer. So when you ask what else to the same question at least 7 times, you penetrate much deeper into the psyche. And you will be surprised how completely different and more truthful the 7th answer will be to the original answer. Therefore, keep asking what else to each question until you feel you have revealed the absolute core truth. What now follows is a set of self-explorative questions that will guide you to explore the detrimental aspects of this archetype. Begin with just one of the detrimental impacts that you have already identified in step 2, and now process it by asking the following questions. And I will use the fantasist archetype as an example to guide you through this questioning process. To keep it simple, and for example, I have identified that the fantasist has a pleasure-based fantasy for chocolate, which I know that is having a detrimental impact on my health because I'm addicted to chocolate bars and they are loaded with bad sugars and trans fats, which are causing me to gain weight and slowly rotting my teeth. So that's the example that I will refer to when going through these questions with you. So, with the first set of questions, we will be exploring the desires and emotions of the archetype. Question number 1. What are the main desires that motivate you to behave this way? So here, we are thinking of the specific rewards, benefits and pleasures that you gain from the detrimental behaviour. And using the fantasist as the example, I would say that I'm motivated by the desire to feel comforted, gratified and satisfied when having a chocolate bar. Simple, right? Question number 2. What are the typical behaviours that you indulge with to get this desire met? Again, using the fantasist's desire for chocolate, I would answer this by saying, I go to the local supermarket or sweet shop which is close to my work, or at home, I have a stash of chocolate in the cupboard. So again, it's a simple question to answer. Question number 3, what pleasurable emotions does this behaviour provide me with? So here I would be describing how it makes me feel good inside to get, have and eat that chocolate. So for example, when I think about going to the shop later to get a chocolate bar, this could produce a strong feeling of anticipation and excitement in knowing that I will soon be getting that delightful chocolate bar. Moving on to question number 4. What are the negative emotional states that this behaviour helps you to get relief from? So again, sticking to the fantasist example, I would answer this question by saying, well, it could be that I'm setting up that chocolate bar later for a discomforting situation that I'm facing at work right now, or within the family environment, where I'm feeling stressed by what I'm doing or feeling miserable about a situation that's taking place. And that's making me think as a little treat, a little reward, a source of comfort, that chocolate bar is going to make me feel good, which it will. And so that fantasy of the chocolate bar has become this little bit of delightful joy that I'm having with my imagination to compensate for the anxiety of what I'm going through now. Moving on to question number 5. Why are these negative emotional states present in your life? Now this is a powerful question. Again, using the fantasist example, it's causing me to think of why I am stressed and miserable. Is it because I'm working too hard? Is it because the work I'm doing is demoralizing? Is it because I have this ongoing dispute in the family home? Here I'm looking to establish what is the situational cause that's producing the negative state that's triggering me to fantasize over the chocolate bar. What is the correlation? What is the correlation between environmental factors out there that's triggering the fantasy within me? So when you are answering this question referring to the archetype that you've identified, you are trying to establish the correlation between environmental and situational factors that are triggering that response within you. Question number 6. What are both the immediate and long-term negative consequences that result from you doing this? So here you are thinking of all the ways that you experience loss, adversity, harm, illnesses and negative emotions as a result of carrying out the detrimental behaviour of this archetype. So again, if we go back to my example with the fantasist and the chocolate bar, what would be the immediate negative consequences? It could be that I'm being distracted by the fantasy itself, and this is causing me to be less attentive with tasks or relationships, where I am less productive and less responsive. It could be that I am building up this image inside my mind of how good that chocolate bar will be later, and this is actually making me feel anxious, irritable and impatient. With long-term consequences, it could be that I am becoming addicted to sugars. I'm slowly developing a slight paunch around the belly. It could be that my skin and the hair is in poor condition and that I'm visiting the dentist on a regular basis to have painful feelings. It could be that I'm losing interest in healthy foods. It could be that I'm becoming more conscious about my body and perhaps I'm beginning to feel a little bit fatter and less attractive, which is then making me shy away from intimate relationships. All of that is coming from a bad habit of eating too much chocolate, where I have become locked into this strong fantasy over chocolate. Question number 7. How does this behavior negatively impact your closest relationships? So here I would be thinking about how this archetype is having negative consequences between me and the people I know. Perhaps it's creating distance, dispute, damage, or disgust even between me and the people I know. So again, let's use the chocolate fantasy as the example. If I have this addiction to chocolate, it could be that I'm bringing home lots of delicious chocolate to my partner and the children. Well, I've kind of become a chocolate dealer where I'm now pushing onto them chocolate, tempting and persuading them to eat more. And thus, they are now victims of my fantasy. They've developed an unhealthy desire for chocolate, which is having a negative impact on their health. And the underlying and unconscious reason that I'm pushing chocolate onto people is because it's making me feel better about my habit. It's normalizing my habit by making everyone else enjoy chocolate with me. It could also be that I'm being taunted by my friends or work colleagues, or shamed even, because I eat too much chocolate. And this causes me to secretly resent them or feel ashamed to even eat with them. Question number 8. How does this behavior negatively impact your newly formed relationships? Well, let's say that I have just met a love interest, and my idea of a nice meal out is to indulge with a nice big chocolate dessert at the end of the meal. Now that's innocent enough, and my love interest might be very eager to join in with me at first, but what if my love interest has started to become sickened by chocolate, and then they realise that I'm eating too much chocolate, and then they start to become repulsed by how much chocolate I actually eat. And clearly, the fantasies are turning me on and turning them off, which could mean the end of the relationship. Flipping it over, we are likely to form relationships with people that have the same fantasies. So if I have started a relationship with someone that loves chocolate and will indulge with me whenever I want, then clearly we're heading for chocolate Armageddon. We are going to develop a relationship with the emotional tie of pleasure that is also tied to the consequential negative impacts of that habit. And this is true with almost any negative habit when we are forming close relationships. We start to tie a bond with our similarities, but if those similarities are having a detrimental impact, then we've kind of created a toxic relationship. Question number 9. What does this behavior prevent you from doing and achieving? With this question, let's introduce the what else questioning technique. Well, my first answer would be that my chocolate fantasy and indulgence means that it's highly unlikely that I will have a pure, natural and healthy diet. Then I would ask, what else? My second answer would be, it could prevent me from eating healthy foods that nourishes my body. Then I would ask, what else again to that same question? And my next answer could be that it prevents me from losing weight. What else? It could prevent me from becoming fitter. What else? It could prevent me from achieving a toned physique. What else? It could prevent me from being more attractive. What else? It could prevent me from being with my ideal partner. Now that last answer is closer to the truth of why I have a chocolate bar fantasy. And here is where the psychology of my fantasy is about to go deeper. Maybe I am scared of being intimate with someone, and thus the chocolate bar fantasy and habit, with all of its negative associations, is not only preventing me from feeling that I am attractive enough, it's also actually saving me. It's actually giving me the excuse of not going out and going through the process of approaching someone and meeting someone, because that would actually make me feel very insecure and fearful. And I really want you to dwell on that for a moment, because most of our self-abusive and self-sabotaging habits come from a place deep within of being unworthy of something, and the habits themselves reinforce that unworthiness. Let's move on to question number 10. What inadequacies do you feel this behavior helps you to avoid dealing with? So again, let's bring us back to feeling insecure and fearful. If I relate this question to the chocolate bar fantasy, I would say that this habit helps me to avoid being intimate with someone. What else? It helps me to avoid dealing with my painful situation. What else? It helps me to avoid dealing with my fear of meeting someone. What else? It helps me to avoid dealing with the reality of a situation in my life that is not fulfilling me. It helps me to avoid the emotions of discontent. Can you now see how these questions are taking you deeper within? Good. Let's move on. Question number 11. What are the short-term rewards and benefits for acting out this behavior? Well, if we are to consider the chocolate habit as a means to avoid dealing with painful situations and to avoid making drastic lifestyle changes, then we are being rewarded from the comfort and ease of staying as is. It benefits me to not have to face the discomfort of change. It benefits me to not have to face my insecurities. I'm also being rewarded with the pleasurable ties that I have with the people who like to indulge in this fantasy and habit with me. I get to maintain that uplifting joy of eating chocolate. I get to keep having that feeling of excitement and anticipation that chocolate is coming, and so on and so forth. Question number 12. In what ways does this behavior limit and disadvantage you, and how does this negatively impact the quality of your life? Here I want you to think of the immediate and long-term drawbacks, setbacks and adversities. So again, referring to the chocolate fantasy and habit, I would say that I'm limited and disadvantaged because I can't lose weight and I can't get physically toned. I can't break my lifestyle habits that cause me stress and anxiety. I can't gain the confidence of being someone that can abstain from temptation and vice. I can't become more worthy of addressing the insecurities that I have surrounding my fantasy. This is having a negative impact because I feel weak at my inability to break a bad habit. I feel disgusted at how fat and unattractive this chocolate habit is making me feel. I feel ashamed and responsible for getting my partner or my kids hooked on chocolate. I feel like whilst I can never overcome this addictive fantasy and habit with chocolate, it will always rule over and control my life. And that's how I would answer that question. Which brings me to this question, question number 13. In what ways does this behavior degrade you psychologically, physically and spiritually over time? And why is this a problem for you? So here you are to notice in what ways that this detrimental impact is making you get worse, inferior, worthless and poorer over time. So let's go back to the chocolate fantasy as the example. And I know that this might seem stupid that chocolate can have such a negative impact, and you might not even be a chocky addict. So just imagine this is a fantasy about that one thing that's driving you crazy because you've got to have it, that's making you behave in ways that are demeaning and degenerative. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be ice cream, it could be pizza, whatever it is. How is it degrading your experience? Question number 14. What are the underlying fears that trigger this behaviour, and where did they come from? So again, this might seem like a stupid question to ask about a fantasy over a chocolate habit. And yet, when we think about the end result of a chocolate habit, which is to get comforting pleasure, then there must be some type of pain, some type of discomfort that's making one think that I really need to have that chocolate to feel good. And there is no greater pain, real or perceived, than fear. Fear is a major trigger. Fear triggers us to take flight away from the thing that we fear, towards the thing that we know will give us relief. So using the chocolate fantasy as the example, I would answer this question by saying that I feel triggered by the actual fear of not having that comforting chocolate bar to soothe my stress. And this fear is coming from the fact that I need to continue with the thing that is giving me stress. Whatever that may be, it could be the job, it could be a dispute, it could be a task. Then I could ask, what else? To which I would then answer, I fear I will not be able to cope if I do not have the chocolate bar in which to soothe myself. And this again is coming from a place of having no other way to cope with the stress. Again, I would ask, what else? And my next answer would be, I fear that I will suffer from discomfort if I do not have the chocolate bar. We could go on and on with this, but the point of this question is to identify the fears that trigger the traits of the archetype that you've identified. So in this instance, it is the fears that are triggering this archetype to carry out a behaviour that is leading to a detrimental impact on your life. Question number 15. What are the underlying insecurities that trigger this behaviour, and where did they come from? So sticking with the chocolate example, and you can relate this to any junk food fantasy and habit, it could be that you are actually insecure about your physical appearance. You feel unattractive, fat or ugly even. And that insecurity is making you feel miserable and upset. And this is actually triggering the fantasy to go and have that junk food to get some alleviating pleasure. And this insecurity could be triggered every time you look into a mirror or take a picture of yourself. If I was to then ask what else to that question to get a different answer, I could then say that I have this insecurity that I will never be attractive enough or accepted by a potential sexual partner, a man or woman that I feel attracted to. And this insecurity arises each time that I do see someone that I feel attracted to, which makes me feel down and kind of dejected, which is then followed by a fantasy of that lovely, delicious junk food to cheer myself up. You would use a rewarding, feel-good treat to feel better about yourself, because that's what pleasurable food does, right? It shifts the way you feel. So let's ask what else again to that same question. What are the underlying insecurities that trigger this behaviour, and where did they come from? The insecurities that I will never be attractive enough to find love, and that makes me feel sad and downbeat. And again, this triggers the fantasy of the chocolate bar to feel comforted. So I hope that you are now beginning to see that these questions are getting you to dig a little deeper into the psychology of an archetype. They are revealing to you that your drives and desires for something are generally triggered by an underlying drive to avoid something.